This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. We are starting quite punctually. It is right at 8:30 in the a.m. Tuesday, January the 11th, here at the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. I am here with Mr. Greg Bringhurst, staff to Senator Sullivan, and our speaker, our guest today. And Mr. Soley has come. And our guest today is actually Senator Sullivan and Team Sullivan. We just had a question regarding subject. If you recall, to close out our year last year, we had Senator Murkowski and her staff to discuss the infrastructure bill. At the time, we had actually tried to make it a joint meeting with Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan, but we weren't able to align those schedules. So we thought we would start our year this year doing a little bit of infrastructure too with Team Sullivan, but also get some broader Washington, D.C. updates. And of course, Senator Sullivan is one of our key senator. Pardon me if I offend by saying so. Our key senator for military issues, and of course. Military is a hot subject here. We have a lot of work that has been done, and we still need to do relative to the F-35s, the Arctic strategies for the Air Force and the Army, to really capitalize on all of his hard work to highlight and put the focus on Alaska, and particularly Fairbanks, Alaska, as the America's Arctic, and our key to national defense and geopolitical strategy for the United States here in the Arctic. Well, with that, I'll go ahead and hand over to Mr. Bringhurst, please.
Yeah, thanks. And Jomo covered it very well. We do have some really stellar staff in DC who have been working on this infrastructure legislation for quite a while. And portions of the bill that have been included now. And so they're able to speak on that. We have 3 or 4 of them that are going to join us today. So Scott, David, Pierce, and Eric, a lot of familiar faces who have portfolio areas that cover transportation, infrastructure, ports, harbors, gosh, you name it, is kind of fair game for questions to those folks. As Jomo stated, the Senator Sullivan's positions in DC with the EPW committee and the Commerce Committee really played a large role in this infrastructure bill. So we are doing what we can to get information out there, answer questions, but also to kind of get people thinking about what's going to happen in the years to come. I personally probably can't speak to that, but that's why we bring the A team from DC on the call. For those of you that are just joining, our schedules in DC are quite hectic, and so the senator will be joining us here when he gets the opportunity, just here in a few minutes. So with that, we look forward to doing the update on the infrastructure bill, and then just a few other DC updates as well.
All right. Well, I see, again, I can see the office of Senator Sullivan. I can see it's currently muted and camera off, but should we hand over to the DC office for any comments?
It might just be,
before we start.
Maybe we should check the link. Where do you see that?
There in the middle, right under Miss Veneersdale.
Oh, it's gotcha.
They might have stepped away. All right, well, then it's you, Mr. Bringhurst. Do you want to see if you can walk through just a little bit?
Well, sure. For those of you that might want to find some stuff, if you're sitting at your computer, there is, if you go to our press releases, and we should have sent this out prior, but there is some press releases that the Senator put out on the infrastructure package that outlines some of the important bullet points for Alaska. So if you searched in our press releases, the bipartisan infrastructure package, you should find it there.
Absolutely. With the indulgence of the group, I'm going to go ahead and pull up Senator Sullivan's website.
And actually, if anybody else has updates to share with the group before the senator jumps on, go ahead and feel free. How about that?
Let's see. Why not seeing. Oh, that's why. I'm gonna help you out here. Okay. So here we have Senator Sullivan's website. And of course, we also, I think we did this also with Senator Murkowski. So those things that you were referring to as far as, oh, there we are, press releases. So under the newsroom. All right. Ninth Circuit. See if we can find that prison defense bill. But as we can see, again, Senator Sullivan has a website, as all legislators do, with lots of good information. And there's also, of course, do you actually want to drive the bus?
Yeah, let me grab this, the one for the infrastructure bill here. I'll get down here really quick. All right, well, let's see. Okay, perfect. Yeah, it looks like we're on time. So, and many of you have seen this already, but just if you've not, I'll help you, guide you to the, and there's a lot of information out there. Of course, the state of Alaska is doing a lot of work on standing up some of what came from the infrastructure bill, but critically important for our state. Let's see. Ooh, one more page. We've been busy.
Very.
So if you look at the August 8th, and gosh, I can't believe it's been since August already. Time is just flying by, and Happy New Year's, everybody. But so here's the statement just about the infrastructure bill from Senator Sullivan, and really working with the delegation. We've just had a powerhouse team in terms of getting this legislation put together and past the finish line. So, but what this does, and if you want to just take a look at it, is kind of talks about some of the portions that were rooted in the EPW committee and the Commerce Committee that Senator worked on for really, in some cases, years, and were included in this bill. But it also outlines some of the specifics for Alaska and broadband, critically important for Senator Sullivan, ferries, transportation, Coast Guard. We'll have a Coast Guard reauthorization coming up here pretty soon. So that'll play a big part in where we've invested through this infrastructure bill. Denali Commission also going to be reauthorized here coming up. There's some work that they have to do in DC with Denali Commission, but huge endeavors through the Denali Commission. They have a new federal co-chair over there, an Alaskan, Garrett, Garrett's last name, Boyles. If you've not met Garrett, and if you are interested more in the Denali Commission, I'd say reach out, and I'm happy to connect you. But bridges, water and sewer, this is something that the delegation talks about all the time, and we could touch on with our LAs on the call, with our policy advisors on the call. But in rural Alaska, it's no secret, we just have a continuing issue with safe water and sanitation, across the state. So it's a big part of this bill. Energy, of course, we'll talk about that today, but streamlining permitting, something super important for the senator, and that I think people are starting to talk about more and more. But you can look at this yourself for sure. And happy once we get the call going and some of our team on the line there in DC, we can touch on a lot of these more in depth or answer some of your questions. Joe?
I know that I'll have a specific question regarding the weatherization program and whether that 3.5 billion is really just for Alaska, or is it spread across the nation?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because Lord knows we have some substantial weatherization needs here in the state, and particularly in the community. All right, how are we doing as far as,
Yeah, it looks like the team is all ready to go.
okay.
Do we have the team there in DC? And if so, as we wait for the senator, do you want to guys introduce yourselves or? Yeah, maybe they're not in there yet.
Well, then I will take this moment, actually, let me see that mouse for a second, to remind everyone, of that of which you know so well, which is that we are going to have the chat line is open. I'll be monitoring it. If you do have specific questions and you'd like to just start queuing them up, this would be a time to do so. That's it, unless you, you're not shy and you don't mind just raising your hand. Okay, but just be reminded of that. And then let's see, do you think I should stop screen sharing? Is there anything else, again, just while we have a moment, do you want to show folks some of the other resources that might be available through this website? Mr. Bringer?
Yeah, of course. There's, I mean, if
I
you've
saw
not
right at
been
the
on
top
the,
the helping you, I've never actually.
yeah, there's, I mean, of course, we typically have a lot of tours for DC, not so much at the moment, but if you were going to DC and wanted to request something through our office, it's there. Flag requests, we do a lot of those for special occasions, and so you can order official flags that have been over the Capitol, come with a certificate, kind of really cool. So that's enough. We do a lot of internships. We actually just announced 2 yesterday.
Can you click on that?
Yeah. So if you know any younger folks that are looking for opportunities in the DC office, or maybe in Anchorage, definitely send them our way just to talk. And even outside of these days, if you know younger people who are looking to get involved, just let me know. I love getting young Fairbanksons in our DC office.
It looks like you actually have several. I wasn't sure if it was just a summer thing, but it looks like you have internships that kind of run throughout the year, lasting.
Yeah, we do, and
3 months.
some are actually outside of this scope too. So there's other opportunities to serve in DC and just really learn. I can't express how it's really. I mean, and you know this from working in Juneau, but you spend a couple months down there, and it's almost like you're getting a master's program. You just get so much information put in front of you, and so many opportunities too. And then, of course, a lot of our interns go back to as staff or in other roles for the senators or within the delegation.
So I see academic
nominations. Yeah, so
but then grants.
Yeah, so we do our best to help share federal opportunities with people throughout Alaska. A lot of that takes some time and resources, our research, but we do our best to help share where the opportunities exist. Some of this might be a little outdated, but we, depending on just a lot of federal resources.
Oh, yeah. All right, we'll appreciate it.
Yeah, and we do help with the academy, military academy nominations. That's something that the senator takes very seriously.
Oh, so those would be to West Point, Annapolis.
Yeah.
Okay. Air Force Academy.
So, and I just got a message from DC. It sounds like we're going to get rolling here pretty quickly. So,
okay. Why don't you go ahead and check the chat? Let me just see what we got going.
okay.
Oh,
Here, I don't know how to drive that. Oh, there you go. Oh, cool.
All right. We just had a testimonial. Thanks, Tracy.
Yes.
All right. I wish I could talk one of my own children into capitalizing on some of these opportunities. Yeah.
They really are good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I do appreciate, thank you everyone for your patience. And thank you, Mr. Bringhurst, for carrying the water.
Yeah, well, you know how things roll with the schedule in DC. We are always on our toes.
How are we as far as the,
It's way back, so that's good.
okay. All right, well, I tell you what, everybody, now might be a good time, again, if you'd like to take a quick break, grab a little extra coffee. I think we do have another minute or two as the Senator traverses.
Oh. 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
That's what they just said. Yeah, 5
Okay.
minutes.
Perfect time for a break.
Perfect time for a break. All right, everybody. So again, we've just gotten notice, the Senator Sullivan's about 5 minutes out. So if you'd like to go ahead and take that, take your 5 minutes, I think I'm gonna go refresh my coffee. So we'll just see you in 5. Thanks. You sure you're good? Sure you're good?
Yep, I'm good.
Actually, let me mute this.
Let's go. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Dan Sullivan. I'm really sorry I'm late. Joe, I don't know if you want to kick it off or whoever is going to kick it off, but thanks for everybody gathering here. And I really apologize. I'll give you a little update on what I was just working on because it's a big deal. And
Senator,
yeah.
this is Greg. We had kicked it off and we kind of had a little conversation about the infrastructure bill and just what's going on in DC and the importance and what we've been doing, reaching out to a lot of Alaskans. So yeah, we want to just kick it off. We've got probably 25 to 30 folks on the line from various organizations in Fairbanks, and we're all very thankful for you taking the time out of the busy schedule in DC to jump on with us.
Well, look, let me just begin, and I'll just give you a little update. I was late. I was just at a press conference. This isn't dealing with infrastructure, but Mitch McConnell has called this the most important week in the U.S. Senate in decades. Here's the reason why. You have the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, who has said he is going to force a vote on his colleagues to essentially get rid of the legislative filibuster. That's the 60 vote threshold rule that makes the Senate a place where you got to work across the aisle, get bipartisan agreement on pretty much almost all legislation. No majority leader in US history has ever tried to get rid of the filibuster. It would essentially make the Senate kind of like the House, just 100 members, not 435. No offense to Don Young, but it would just make it a very different body. And so we're doing a lot of things to kind of pressure folks and remind them of speeches they have given recently. Senator Schumer, President Biden, many others saying, hey, getting rid of the filibuster would be a disaster for the country. They're now saying we need to get rid of it because of horrible voting rights practices pushed by Republican states. In my press conference, I walked through Alaska's voting laws, which are much more expansive in terms of voting rights than almost any other state, certainly more than New York, certainly more than Delaware. So my point was, hey, come talk to me about these issues when your state has voting rights, expansive procedures, Democrat and Republican support in our state for years, as good as my state, right? So anyways, this is a big issue. Sounds a little inside baseball. It's an enormous issue for America. And to be honest, I'm kind of shocked that he's going to force his vote to get rid of the legislative filibuster. No majority leader in US history has ever done that. And it's pretty shocking. But anyways, I want to thank all of you. I know it's been a rough couple of years. I'm looking forward to actually getting in to Fairbanks Friday, spending some time there. I don't know if it's a top secret event that's going on Friday afternoon. I'm told, I told it's not a surprise. Oh, okay, I thought it was a surprise for Jim. I don't know if Jim's on. I didn't want to blow the surprise, so I'm looking forward to seeing him and probably.
No, it's okay, Senator Sullivan. The cat did come out of the bag, so he knows.
Joe, sorry, I did not leak that.
No, you didn't.
Just for the record, I'm going to be in Fairbanks celebrating a great Alaskan, but I was a little nervous. My staff said, nope, it's not a surprise. So I'm looking forward to being with all you guys just in a couple days to celebrate all the work that you're doing and that Jim has done. I wanted to just briefly, and then really wanted to take Q&A as much as possible. I think that's much more. I had an op-ed that ran, I think it ran in the News Miner today, and it was kind of laying out what I saw as some of the real positive things that we've been able to get done. By the way, a lot happening in the interior in particular. And then, to be perfectly honest with everybody, just some of the big challenges that we had. I mentioned these 20 executive actions by the Biden administration really focused on shutting down Alaska. It's actually now 21. You may have seen they filed an action to renew the entire NPRA integrated activity plan. That sounds very wonky. It's in a huge issue, and they're going to reverse and go back 10 years to the Obama plan when the Trump plan was authorized by federal agencies, and would have been a much, in our view, a much better plan for our state and our country, and for that matter. But one of the things I mentioned in the op-ed that I do think is a really important issue, and it's gotten, to be perfectly honest, some different interpretations, was the bipartisan infrastructure bill, what I call the hard infrastructure bill. That is not a perfect bill by any means. No bill is perfect, but that bill, and there's been a lot of discussion out there, what's in it, what's not in it. That bill is principally a bill that is focused on classic infrastructure, roads, bridges, ports, airports, harbors, and importantly, broadband. And in addition, and I think Fairbanks in the North Pole interior area is going to really like this. I highlight this in the op-ed, with the monies going to military infrastructure from what was called the National Defense Authorization Act, which passed and was signed into law about a month ago. And this hard infrastructure bill, primarily related to Coast Guard infrastructure, that's going to be about an additional $350 million in military infrastructure for our state. Most of the NDAA military infrastructure will be coming to the interior. So as you know, we've had about 1.6 billion in military infrastructure in the last 5 years. This is continuing that really important trend. Great for the national security of our nation, but really important for jobs and our economy in the interior, in other parts of the state. So when it comes to some of the key elements that are in this bill, what I wanted to emphasize are a couple key areas. One is that most of the infrastructure dollars, and Alaska does really, really well relative to other states. I'm on the Environment and Public Works Committee. We wrote a lot of this bill. It built on the 5-year highway bill that passed out of committee last year. But most of the federal dollars that are in this bill are actually going to go to the state. And I think that's the best way to approach infrastructure, because our legislators, our governor, our Department of Transportation, that will be getting a lot of this money, they know a lot better than federal bureaucrats in DC on where to prioritize infrastructure monies. So that's one thing that's actually, from my perspective, very positive about this. You know, I always say we are a resource-rich but infrastructure-poor state. We have less road miles than Connecticut, if you can believe that, and we're almost 120 times bigger than Connecticut. We missed out on the big build out in the 1950s for the National Highway program under Eisenhower. And when so much of the infrastructure was happening, big infrastructure in America, it didn't have 10-year permitting delays with regard to NEPA and other things. So an important element of this bill also is there's very significant, although not as good as I would have liked, permitting reform for infrastructure projects. This, I think some of you know, has been a passion of mine since my time as the DNR commissioner, and since I got to the Senate, Alaska in many ways is ground zero with regard to, you could have a $5 trillion infrastructure bill, but because it takes so long to permit projects, particularly from the federal perspective, that you just waste the money and you waste time and you don't get to deploy the resources. So some of you might know I had this bill called, and I'm reintroducing it. I've already reintroduced it in this Congress, called the Rebuild America Now Act. That was a very big overhaul of the NEPA law, the National Environmental Policy Act. During the Trump administration, we worked with the White House to get an executive order issued by the Trump White House on essentially permitting reform that reflected a lot of what was on my Rebuild America Now Act. Really popular, bringing timelines for permitting down to 2 years, one federal decision, so you don't have 30 different federal agencies, but one in charge. Unfortunately, on day one of the Biden administration, he rescinded that. The reason I'm giving you that history is we got a fair amount of that executive order back into this infrastructure bill. Not as much as we would have wanted, but there is really good federal permitting timelines, efficiencies that will make our projects a lot more, to have a lot more of the ability to come online much more quickly. That's in law now. That can't be changed in another EO. So that's another area that we think is really positive for Alaska. My team and I worked and wrote a lot of that, a lot of the elements of the permitting reform in this bill. There's a whole section in this bill on focusing on streamlining critical mineral mining and processing, which also is really important for our state. There is a section that would have up to $18 billion in federal loan guarantees for the AK LNG project. So the AK LNG project and Alaska Natural Gas is specifically highlighted in this bill for federal loan guarantees. Those aren't grants, but as you know, if the feds are guaranteeing loans, that can dramatically bring down the costs of doing a project. So, you know, for those who have been saying, oh, this infrastructure bill is a Green New Deal, baloney. I mean, this has very focused hydrocarbon, critical mineral provisions that we were able, Senator Murkowski and I, Congressman Young, to get into this bill. Let me give you one other area that I think is very exciting, and we need to be able to do it in a way that all of us are going to come together. This will have a massive, we don't have the exact number. Our estimate is about 1.5 billion in funds going to the state of Alaska for broadband deployment. Now, this is another area where when I mentioned resource rich, infrastructure poor, we are the least connected state in the country by far in terms of broadband deployment. That's why in this bill, we were able to write the law that made the feds focus on truly unserved populations first, and then go into kind of urban areas to increase their speeds of internet connectivity. So we're anticipating just to the state about 1.5 billion over 5 years. The governor is going to be in charge of that with our legislature. We've been coordinating closely with his office. We know they're already putting together a broadband deployment office. And here's the great opportunity for us. This is in addition to a very important tribal deployment of broadband program, a very important U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Utility Service program for broadband deployment, what's called the Alaska Plan by the Federal Communications Commission, which will be about another $500 million over 5 years. Our goal, and we're going to lead this effort, is to try to make sure we are bringing everybody together, everybody in Alaska, all the stakeholders, working with the feds, working with the governor, to convene and make sure we are strategizing in a way that's smart to get these federal dollars coordinated in a way that really helps connect every community in our state. You guys all know, in many ways, broadband is 21st century infrastructure. And if we can do it by broadband or other means, the connectivity in small parts of our state or in big parts like Fairbanks or North Pole for small businesses, for healthcare, for education is enormous. This is a gigantic opportunity that we all need to work together on executing, and we're going to be very focused on it. We want everybody's input on it. Finally, I think we have a couple of our state legislators on the call, and I just want to mention, we also believe, and I put it in my op-ed today, that given that there's this significant amount of hard infrastructure dollars coming to the state over the next 5 years, that hopefully this will be a spur for our state legislature, our governor, to be able to get to a long-term fiscal plan, because there's going to be a lot of federal dollars that they can count on over the next 5 years coming to Alaska. So that's really the wave tops of this. Look, I'll be honest, there's some things in this bill I don't like. I think there's too much money kind of to the Department of Energy on these special projects that I think could lead to a significant waste of taxpayer dollars. But from my perspective, I have been very focused on this issue from day one. Alaska has missed out on many elements of federal national infrastructure. And to me, when I got to the Senate, playing catch up in this area was really important. And this bill does a lot in that regard. And so we're trying to get the word out. We're really grateful that you guys would come together to hear on this. And I would welcome anybody's questions or comments or suggestions. A huge part about this is now we got to deploy it. We got to do it efficiently and smart. And but this is going to put a lot of people to work and have long-term consequences that I think are positive for our state and our country.
All right, well, thank you very much, Senator Sullivan, both for that very good overview, but also for all the hard work that achieved those things to talk about. And so again, great job, much appreciated. We do have a number of questions there in the chat box, but I do see John Burns' hand up. So if you don't mind, I'll start with John Burns.
Yeah, great. Senator, thank you very much for all your team's efforts.
Hey, John, good to see you.
Yeah, great. Not just what you're doing now, but your past service with DNR and AG's office. Can you give us kind of an insight where the reconciliation bill stands? I know there's been a lot of discussion and it seems like it's just kind of spinning around, but from your perspective, where does the Build Back Better stand?
Yeah, look, I'm glad you asked that, because it actually is a point that relates to this infrastructure bill. Unlike this bill, the Build Back Better bill, I think, will be a disaster for the country, a disaster for Alaska. It actually specifically targets Alaska energy projects such as inaugural to get rid of them. It, I think, would supercharge inflation the way that the March 2021 relief bill that was a very partisan bill did. And so I won't go into all the problems that I have with the Build Back Better. That's even a misnomer. I think it's Build Back worse. And it would really change the trajectory of our country in many ways. One of the things that's been deceitful about that bill is they've put in several new social programs, but only for 1 year. Well, nobody intends for those to be 1 year. When the Congressional Budget Office scored this, if the programs that were put in went for 10 years, the duration of that bill, they scored it a $5 trillion bill. I mean, it's just crazy. The reason it's connected to the infrastructure bill is one of the things that I was arguing and a number of folks were arguing is if we're able to get a vote on this hard infrastructure bill, which I believe we do need, again, not a perfect bill, but a bill that goes into long-term hard infrastructure, that some of the senators, particularly Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, if he got a vote on that, then he would be much less inclined to actually vote for the Build Back Better, so-called Build Back Better. If you remember, John, initially these were all combined into one. And there was this move to split them. Hard infrastructure, which is what I just briefed you on, and Build Back Better. You knew that certain groups thought that was dangerous from their perspective of getting hard infrastructure done because some of the real far left members of the House, the progressive members, did not want that to happen. They wanted to keep them together. They thought if they were split, that senators like Manchin would have more leverage to shape both and maybe just walk away from Build Back Better if he was able to vote on the infrastructure bill first. That was my argument. Again, some people were saying, no, if you pass hard infrastructure, that's going to pave the way for Build Back Better. That argument was exactly wrong. No offense to the people who made it. That argument was exactly wrong. Because what happened, you may have seen right before Christmas, is Joe Manchin did come out and say, look, I can't get there on Build Back Better. By the hard infrastructure, I'm all in, I'm glad it passed. But on the broader socialist spending, particularly the real number of 5 trillion, and the real worries about inflation, which are hitting everybody, is probably the number one issue I hear from Alaskans right now, the big inflation challenges that hit everybody. So Manchin essentially said, I'm not going there. So right now, and look, this could always change. Right now, Build Back Better is dead. And I think that's good. I think it's really good for Alaska. I think it's good for America. And Manchin was quoted just a couple days ago. He's not even in discussions with the Biden White House on that bill. So that could always change. But right now, that bill is dead. And in many reasons, the bill is dead because we split it off, focused on the hard infrastructure, which, you know, had a lot of Republican senators, a really broad array, conservative, liberal, Republicans. And I think that that split put the deep six on Build Back Better for now, and I hope for good.
Well, thank you for that, sir. So regarding, well, we have a number of questions in the chat box. And so if we could, I'd like to go ahead and touch on those because they do relate to the bill that did pass and the money that's coming down the pike. The very first one was regarded the railroad, and if there was any money within this infrastructure bill that could be used to, say, extend the railroad out towards Fort Greely and then further out towards the Canadian border, and perhaps even that full connection to the lower 48 railroad grid.
Yeah, you know, Joe, let me get back to you on that. I know there is money for the railroad. I don't know if it would, you know, a lot of us were excited about the presidential permit that was issued by the Trump administration for the A2A project, which I think has huge strategic opportunities. There's definitely money for certain railroad projects in this. We can get back to you on the details. There are some areas where the feds, you know, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Commerce have discretion to focus on deploying money to individual states. So it's not all going to the states. But I think on the railroad, there is funding. We can get you the details, but I'm positive there's no funding for like the big strategic project that would go from Alaska down through Canada, the A2A project. There is not directed funding for that like there was, say, for the AK LNG project.
I know they had some safety infrastructure that they needed to install, the railroad. And so if all this did was help them defray that cost, that would be helpful for their bottom line.
Yeah, we can get back to you on that. I know the Alaska Railroad was supportive of this bill and legislation. So we'll get back to you on the details. Some of what's in here, let me just give you another example. Like I said, there is funding in terms of plussing up some of these big federal programs like the build grants and other things. You know, I know we're focused primarily in the interior, but one of the areas we think is going to have enormous potential. I've been working with the mayor of Anchorage on the port of Anchorage, the port of Alaska, which needs federal funds and, you know, is really critical for the whole state. I think close to 90% of all of our goods that come into the state, regardless of where they end up, like in the interior, come through that port. So we're going to be very focused on the next step as we talk about implementation. A lot of it does go to the state, to the governor, to the Department of Transportation. I'll give you an example. You guys are all familiar with the STIP. That's the Alaska DOT list of key infrastructure projects. You know, the provisions in this bill provide it's close to $4 billion over 5 years that are going to go directly into that STIP. I mean, that's big money for our state. And that will be directed by the state, by the governor, by the legislature, by the state of Alaska Department of Transportation, similar with the broadband funds. But some of this we will be applying to state federal agencies on some of these funds where we all need to be working together to try to get those grants back to us.
Thank you, sir. So as you would expect from this group, we have several questions regarding energy, this being the Energy for All Alaska Task Force. So I would ask, I guess we should start with, and this was a question that I had for Greg as he got started with the overview, energy efficiency. I saw that there was a good sizable bump for weatherization programs. Can you speak to that? Or just really, can you speak to or go a little more in depth on any of the range of funds that are going to be applied or can be applied to energy projects? Be they natural gas, energy efficiency work, electrical generation or transmission?
So I think there's two. I think there's about 2.5 billion. Is that now? That's not just the state of Alaska, but on the issue of transmission lines. As I mentioned, there's 18 billion in loan guarantees, up to 18 billion in loan guarantees for the Alaska natural gas project. So that's huge, and we really need to look at working together to take advantage of that. That can lower the costs of that project enormously. What were the other? Yeah, and then there now, you know, and I know in some areas this is it's a little bit controversial, but there were significant funds, over $6 billion. Again, this will be directed by the feds, focus on hydro, hydrogen, and nuclear. And you know, there have been these discussions, and we got to continue the discussion in Alaska of a small-scale nuclear power generation. You may have seen the Air Force actually put out something as it relates to Eielson on that they're looking at. And then there's it's not as much as I would have thought about. Close to 230 million, again, applied for from the feds on updating energy building codes with regard to energy efficiency. You know, that issue, particularly in Alaska, it's very important, but you also have the balance that has to happen with regard to our home builders. And I hear a lot from them on those issues. you want to have energy efficiency opportunities, but the mandates, there's some concern that if they're too overburdening, they're going to really limit the ability to build housing. And we all know that that's a challenge. It's actually a big challenge everywhere in Fairbanks, in North Pole, in Anchorage, down in Southeast. So those are some of the key issues as it relates to energy.
That's a good question, Tracy. The final one. If you don't mind, sir, I know that you have to get to lunch, and so I do apologize to the rest of the group. Again, I know that your schedule is tight.
No, I can take a few more. Joe, I apologize for being late here. I know you guys are very patient, and I hate.
No,
I can certainly take a couple more.
I can't tell you how much we appreciate you making time for us.
Yeah.
Yes, no apology necessary.
I mean, I work for you guys. That's my view.
And you're doing great. So, sir, I would ask, so we have a final question here in the chat boxes. Can you share any more detail on where and how that $350 extra million in funding will go? Military funding?
Yeah. So the hard infrastructure bill was focused mostly on Southeast. And that was I think it was about 190 million. As it related to Southeast communities, particularly as we're building up our Coast Guard. It's primarily Kodiak, Ketchikan, and remember the other, was it Sitka? We can get you the specifics down in Southeast. Then the NDAA, the Defense Authorization Act, the remainder of that 350, so I think it was about 160 million. Most of that actually is going to be coming to the interior, and that is for primarily issues related to health and welfare of our troops. One issue that I know you guys see it, it's just heartbreaking in our military. I can tell you, because I'm all over it. I was communicating with the Secretary of Defense just last week on it. We have had this incredibly horrible spike in suicides in the Alaska military. Numbers that are shocking, just off the charts. And it just makes you want to cry, right? We've had 6 young soldiers take their own lives since I think October in Alaska. 6. This is close to, I think we're over 30 in the last. More soldiers have been killed by suicide in Alaska than in Afghanistan in the last 4 years. So I have been pounding the military on this issue, like, hey, come on, guys, ladies, like, we gotta fix this. Geez Louise, this is. Now, to their credit, they are all in. They are all in. The top Secretary of the Army, Chief of Staff of the Army, they are focused on Alaska health and welfare kind of related issues, not just hard training, but things that can make, living on base in Alaska, especially for a young, single soldier, better. So a lot of that 165 million goes to those kind of health and welfare related issues. We can get you the specifics, but they're primarily going to be in the interior. There's some down at J-Bear relating to the extension of the runway down there with our expanded Air Force activities. But that primarily is coming in the interior, which is great news. And, you guys all know, and we're very focused on it together, this housing issue, we got to stay laser focused on because, I've had some discussions very recently. You may have seen, we hosted right before Christmas, the Secretary of the Air Force in the interior at dinner. We had at Eielson. Some of the members on this call actually were at that dinner. And we got to be very focused on our own housing efforts with the state and the borough and North Pole and Fairbanks. But this military construction, which is in the NDAA, is very focused on health and welfare related matters that, we just don't want any more suicides, for God's sakes. And I know you guys are all doing it. Military members in the interior, just thank them, right? A lot of these suicides can be like a virus that you see certain units or certain places that happens to one guy, and then it happens to one young woman, then it happens to another, and we're seeing that right now. Like I said, 6 since October. It's just devastating.
Thank you for your comments on that, Senator. Much appreciated, and your efforts. I would like to, there's one more question because it came up from Senator Murkowski, and then we'll get to you, John, if we can. And in regards, frankly, regards workforce and work capacity. It's with so many funds coming down, with so many projects in the offing, again, the ability of our own internal workforce here in the state of Alaska to do that work. Really, she commented on a lack of properly trained Alaskans and workforce development. Can you speak to that as well?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really important issue. I've heard it from the governor. I've heard it from some of our union leaders, particularly in the building trades, laborers, operating engineers, IBW with the, broadband deployment. And I will tell you, there are 2 issues that make me nervous, and we just got to get ready for it. You guys have a great training center there in Fairbanks, a couple of them actually, for our workforce. This is something I think we have to collectively get ready for with the building trades, with the state, with the borough, to have the workforce that's available to take on these very significant projects. We do not want to have this great opportunity and all of a sudden have to import labor from the lower 48. I will tell you another area that's kind of related, and I've talked to some of the White House folks on this. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a very, very almost obsessive about permitting reform. The biggest tragedy of this whole thing would be if we had these significant funds coming our way in the federal permitting system, in the federal government, which, by the way, as you look at my op-ed, like I said, is not helping Alaska right now, can't get out of its own way in terms of permitting these projects to deploy the money. That is another area of high risk. So to me, the 2 biggest are trained workforce, which we can get on and get ready for collectively, but permitting projects so we can deploy the money. And that I worry about sometimes the feds won't get out of its own way. And I'm very, very focused on both of those, but it's a good question. And the workforce issue is one that we got to be ready for. To be honest, it's a good problem to have, right? That we're anticipating so much economic activity that we got to make sure enough of our workforce is trained and ready to take advantage of it. I'd rather have that problem than the opposite problem where there's nothing going on. But we got to be ready for that, and we got to be ready on the permitting side to make sure we don't undermine our own efforts after getting this bill done.
Agreed. And excellent note. I really hadn't thought about that eventuality regarding the permitting. Again, with 5 years of funding coming down, a permit takes so long that we actually never get to deploy the funds.
Exactly. And
tragedy.
I've been talking to some of the labor leaders, national, and they are really worried about it. And I share their concerns. So we got to, and by the way, if you guys, this is a huge part of what I do is, being privileged to represent all of you guys. If you guys are having problems, with regard to federal permitting, do not wait to have to try to battle these guys on your own. reach out to my office immediately. Greg, Lisa, Chad Pageant, who's now my new state director, who knows a lot about the permitting process. Let us get in the arena and fight these federal agencies for you. Don't try to do that on your own. They'll rope-a-dope you to death. We will be right in there to fight for this. Well, listen, everybody, thanks again. Sorry I was late. Great to see all of you. I'm going to see hopefully a lot of you at the party on Friday in Fairbanks, and keep up the great work. A lot of this is going to just be continued congressional delegation, state of Alaska, FEDC, borough, city coordination, and we got to stay on it. In some ways, the easy part's done. The hard part of implementing this smartly, effectively, efficiently is now before us, and we got to stick together in doing that together.
Senator Sullivan, thank you so very much. Thank you for making the time. And again, none of us can thank you enough for all of your efforts on our behalf, particularly regarding this infrastructure bill and other items. We really cannot thank you enough. So
Great.
For everyone.
Thanks, Shoma. I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys in 48 hours.
All right, see you, Dan. Thanks.
Thanks,
John.
Senator.
Thanks.
All right, and for the remainder of the group, just so you know, we have arranged, we're actually going to have an update from IGU next week as our guests. They just gave their quarterly to the FNSB Assembly, so they'll go ahead and give us our update regarding their operations, our midwinter update. And I can just let you know, I will be reaching out. John, this is your heads up. Meadow, this is your heads up. I will be reaching out to GBEA to see if they might be the next presentation after IGU. Again, the yeoman's work that our utility has been doing relative to those bad storms. I'd love to be able to hear about that. Certainly, we've been seeing your efforts, and it is much appreciated. All right, everybody.
Happy to give an update.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, everybody. That's it. Have a great rest of your day, a great week, and we will see you next week.